Hej, jag heter Indy och den här är Out of the Trenches. När jag sitter här i the chair of wisdom och svarar alla era frågor om första världskriget. Connor O'Brien writes, Indy and gang. Yeah, gang. Indy and gang. Love the show, thanks for all your hard work. One of my favorite things about the show is how it gives a high-level view of the entire war and what was going on across the globe in real time. Well, real time minus 100 years. True. My question is, was this level of global strategic knowledge available to anyone during the war? I would imagine that common soldiers and citizens would not have any real idea what was happening in other theaters of war, but did the High Command have a good idea of what was going on? Was the war effort coordinated globally with other nations and across all theaters of war? Or were theaters operating independently and theater commanders left to make their own decisions on location and timing of offensives? Are you sure that's all you have to ask? That was a hell of a long question. Well, the common soldiers in the field would probably know nothing of what was going on in the world at the time. The war suppressed free press and banned newspapers from enemy nations. Soldiers had to rely on their state-controlled press. The field newspapers would probably not directly lie to the troops, because the troops were actually on the battlefield, but they would sugarcoat the overall situation to keep morale up and keep panic away from the lines. They would highlight acts of bravery and praise victories effusively. Of course, rumors and news traveled from regiment to regiment when the men met in the field. Soldiers that served with high-ranking officers would sometimes overhear certain news that they maybe weren't supposed to hear, and of course, they would pass it on to their comrades. You can probably see that best, or all of this best, at the end of the war, when many German citizens were totally surprised by the fact that the war was lost. I mean, they had no idea it was going so badly. Intentionally misinformed up to that point by High Command with tales of victory and impending victory for the whole war. Of course, not on the same level that the Nazis spread their propaganda in the Second World War, but still, a big part of the public was shocked by news of the defeat since they knew little of how dire the situation actually was. It's often said that one of the major powers for the Central Powers during the war was the lack of interaction between their commanders, especially between Germany and Austria-Hungary, who had that land connection, but they didn't communicate very well. But even the internal coordination between German commanders was pretty difficult at times. The Allies fared a bit better, but you can really see their failures in communicating with each other in 1916. A better combined strategy could have brought the Central Powers to their knees that summer. Mr. Fallout. Oh, he's using an IVI to make the M. Clever. All right, Mr. Fallout. Hey guys, love the show. Keep up the excellent work. I've seen a lot of pictures from the Western Front of soldiers using equipment from other sides, i.e. British Mark I tanks with German crews. How prevalent was using the enemy's equipment in the war? For the Germans, it became pretty important to capture those tanks that they knocked out on the battlefield. They would transport them behind the lines and repair and remodel them. Since the manufacturing of the German A7V was handmade, very expensive, and drained so many resources that they could use elsewhere, the use of captured tanks soon became preferable to building their own. The biggest number of what were called Beutepanzer, the captured tanks, consisted of British Mark IV tanks, which they outfitted with high-caliber Maxim guns and sometimes even anti-tank rifles. Other than that, we've said before that every nation had their own native calibers, so it became impossible to resupply captured guns once ammunition ran out. In the field, soldiers often had to improvise, and during an attack, if you lost your own gun or your equipment was shot to pieces, or you ran out of ammunition, well, yeah, you used the gear you had available, and most designs were pretty similar to each other, so using a different machine gun, for example, wasn't that complicated. On the Eastern Front, actually, Germans captured so many Moisin-Nagant Russian rifles that it made sense for them to actually use them and produce ammunition for them because there were so many of them. There were no orders to explicitly capture the guns of the enemies in general, since most of them were, pretty similar. Corey Adjutant or Adjective or Cook. Corey Cook. Let's just call him Corey Cook or her. Corey Cook writes, "Hi, Indy and team. I love the show and currently making my own World War I landscape on Minecraft." All right. I have a question for Out of the Trenches. In history, when I was learning about the First World War as part of my exams in Scotland, too right, I was told about during a battle that a single Scottish bagpiper crossed no man's land with the men but was wounded and kept playing on. My question is, were there men like this that actually joined the men going over the top to boost morale? Thank you for a great show and all the work you do. All the work I do or just the work I do on this show? Well, you're welcome anyhow. The bagpipe is not just a musical instrument, but it is a historic symbol that accompanied Scottish and other British soldiers for centuries in the field and was part of many battles and many rebellions. The music was played to boost the morale of the troops as well as to frighten the enemy. There are quite a few stories of bagpipers courageously leading British or Scottish troops into the attack. One of those pipers was Daniel Laidlaw of the 7th King's Own Borderers. Now, in I believe September 1915, when the Battle of Loos started, as the British were preparing to charge the German positions, their trenches were hit by enormous gas attacks, which caused widespread panic. Laidlaw saw this, emerged from over the parapet and started playing on his bagpipe All the Blue Bonnets Over the Border, which is actually quite catchy and you should look it up. Anyhow, he marched up and down the parapet despite being under enemy fire, playing his old bagpipe. And seeing his bravery and hearing the familiar tune, new courage immediately sprung into the hearts of the soldiers, and they stormed over the top with a deafening war cry. Piper Laidlaw was wounded during the attack, but he did survive, and he was awarded the Victoria Cross for his action. Pipers were traditionally unarmed, and their death rate was as high as any other soldier, more even so since they stood out in the open field when they played their bagpipes. But they were a rather essential part of keeping the morale high in dire situations. If you'd like to see our episode about the Battle of Loos and how it began, you can click right here to see that. Do not forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.